Well, welcome to Vitalis and Gothenburg, Hazel.
Well, thank you. It's great. I've walked around the event already. It's amazing.
Well, this is, as you heard, a podcast for 2025, and we are in a temporary studio here at Vitalis. And is this your first time to?
Yes, yeah, it is my first time, and I'm going to make sure I get a look around tomorrow. I've factored in some time to have a look around Gothenburg tomorrow, so that'll be amazing.
You work for the NHS, which is the sort of main healthcare supplier in England and the UK.
Yeah.
And NHS Digital carries out the e-health work in England. And if I would transfer it to Swedish, that will be like equivalent to our Inera, which is a company owned by all the healthcare regions and municipalities in Sweden. You are the head of the apps and wearables program. It's the department, as I understand, that has been created within the NHS Digital to test and validate apps and other digital services within the health and social care in England.
That's right, yes.
You're also one of the speakers here at Vitalis this year, talking about your validation, I would say, model or work in England, a topic that we will focus on in this podcast today. It will be very interesting to hear more about your experiences. In Sweden, we have not yet launched a national validation process, but there is an ongoing work. But we don't it's too early to say whether it's going to be lead to a national process with equivalent to what you have. So that is the background of this podcast today, and let's move on to the exciting work that you do in England. As I understand, apps and wearables is a relatively new department within NHS Digital. We pretty much know what it means with apps, but could you explain what is wearables?
Yeah, so the wearables piece, so there are already devices out there that people use, so fitness devices, those kind of wearables, and they're all also medical devices, so devices that can track and monitor things like EPG, heart performance, that kind of thing. So apps and wearables is really about saying what can we do to make those more available to citizens, so not just patients, or where can we accept devices in where somebody has their own device and enable the providers of those devices to integrate that data into healthcare records, so that rather than it just being an individual that's tracking their own health, it actually forms part of their health record. And I must admit, for me, the wearables, where I'd like us to get to is the wearables devices that can actually save lives. So I lost a friend who was diabetic, who had moved from animal insulin over to human insulin, and she fell asleep and didn't wake up again. And if she'd been wearing a device that was connected to an app that could have alerted her through the phone, through an alarm of some sort, to let her know that her sugars were low, then that kind of thing is where I'd love us to get to. But at this moment in time, we're looking at what are the measures that we need to have in place and the framework to establish whether a device is safe and trusted to be used for people's healthcare and social care needs.
Okay, so what kind of healthcare apps and digital tools are you validating? Could you give an example? Yeah,
so we're doing all sorts. So we've been running this as a beta program for the past year, which has given us the opportunity to try and understand really what are the different types of apps and what would be a proportionate validation based on an app type. So we might be looking at apps that provide care services. So we did look at GP, general practitioner apps that you can use, that you can have a video call with a GP or a doctor. But we also look at things that are more based on wellness, and we've got one app which I always mention, which is it's called Brush DJ, and it is literally an app that plays 2 minutes of music from your music library to remind a child to brush their teeth for 2 minutes. So we go from literally one end of the scale to the other in terms of those, and then we have what we call connected devices, connected apps, which are apps that allow you to book repeat prescriptions online, to book a GP appointment. We've got kind of digital transactional apps, what we call adjunct therapy style apps, and then wellness type apps as well.
Then I understand that you have validated similar, like Bubble on Health, which is, as I understood, equivalent to our Curie or Doctor.se or Doctor24. Similar type of apps then that you have validated? Yeah,
so we did. I mean, at the moment, we're not including those apps within the apps library, so they're no longer there. But that app was piloted within a local region.
Okay.
But yes, we've looked at all sorts of apps.
Does the validation process only cover products that need to integrate with the healthcare system, or is it just any apps?
No, so it's any app. So it's anything that can improve an outcome. So that could be something that's linked into a system, but it could be a standalone app. So things like chat health, actually. So we have one called Chat Health, which is not an app. It's a texting service, and it means that young adults and children can have a text-based conversation with their school nurse. So where it might be a subject that's slightly embarrassing, they can text rather than have a face-to-face. So we look at websites at the moment also, so a full range.
Does the validation process apply only to commercial organizations? Or?
No, it applies to any app that goes on the library has to have undergone the same level of assessment.
All right. Is the idea that it's only validated products or services that should be purchased and used within the NHS?
So what we're doing at this stage, what we're focusing on more are showcasing apps that we believe will be beneficial based on information that we receive from the app developer. So some of them, beyond that, there will be an option for those app developers to work with regional innovation hubs to then take it from being just a showcased app to becoming a commissioned app with the local regions. But that commissioning decision is handled at a regional level.
All right.
Some services can be commissioned at a national level. But what we're aiming at doing is showcasing them so that citizens can elect to use them, at the same time as understanding what we need to provide into clinicians so that they can start to use them in their consultations.
Mm-hmm. A year ago, you launched a website with support, rules, and also guidance for developers and innovators. It's called developer.nhs.uk. And the idea is that it helps companies and innovators to develop digital products with high quality to the social, to the healthcare and the social service. Can you give me some information about that site? What sort of thing can I find there?
So at the moment, actually we've got a team that are working behind the scenes on improving the functionality and the look and feel of that site. But at the moment, it just introduces the app's process, so it explains the process. It allows developers to submit their interest in being part of the process, and then once they have been selected to go through assessment, it allows them to complete that assessment online. Before it was quite manual. When we were testing the process, it was quite manual. And it also provides information for developers that do want to integrate in with NHS systems. It gives them access to the APIs and the technical documentation to allow them to do that. But what we want to do is to make that the kind of go-to place for people that are developing apps but don't understand the healthcare sector, to understand how to interpret regulation for their app. Mm-hmm. So, for example, an app developer wouldn't necessarily assume that their app is a device, but if it has an algorithm, then it could be considered a device. So we'll be trying to make that as simple to understand as possible. So that's what, and it will be a self-service kind of developer community where they can post questions and get responses online.
All right. How does this validation process work then?
So validation has a few different elements to it. So first of all, we have an eligibility piece at the moment. And the eligibility piece is so that because we have so much demand from so many developers that want to come in and be part of the process, we've had to prioritise certain health themes that are aligned with our strategic health themes. So things like cancer, diabetes, long-term conditions, maternity, mental health. So first of all, we assess the apps against an eligibility criteria. So we look at pricing, we look at the health theme, and then it goes to a clinical review where some of our experts from around those health themes will kind of have a look and play around with the app and say, does this feel like the right app in the first place to even invite in for validation? And then once that happens, and it's deemed to be a suitable app, they'll be invited in, they'll get an online invitation to an online process that they then start to submit their responses through that process. And for each of the sections, it's broken into different sections. So we've got things like indicators of effectiveness, clinical safety, data protection and privacy and security, and they can fill out each of those sections, and then we have an expert that sits behind that reviews their responses, and they may ask for evidence of each piece, and then it goes through, the conversations are held within that process online, and then once it's completed that process, they get given the thumbs up, and then it's published into the nhs.uk apps library.
All right. So how long does the entire validation process take place for a sort of typical product?
Well, it's interesting because there is no typical product, sadly. No app tends to meet the criteria, apart from, I think, Brush DJ. But most of the other apps that have complexities, none of them tend to meet the standard immediately. Right. So no one passes through first time. It takes some kind of consulting, really, back and forth to say, this is what this means and this is what we need you to see. So on average, it's around 3 to 4 months for an app with serious functionality to get through. But for us, in terms of the review internally, it takes us around 2 weeks from receiving a completed application to then review it and go back with an initial findings report. Okay.
After you completed the validation process, I understand then the product is published on your sort of marketplace. Is that true?
Yes. So at the moment, because we're in beta phase, and we needed to factor in the kind of user research of how people will actually look for this information so that we can make sure it's positioned in the right place. At the moment, we've just got an apps library that we don't really showcase. We've not really gone ahead with serious marketing on that until we get to the live products, which we're targeting this September. But by September, we will have sat down with different patient groups, different carer groups, clinicians, GPs, to understand, okay, so if somebody has a need in this area, describe to me how you would tell them to find information about that, or if it's a person themselves looking for the information, we will literally sit down with them and get them to show us what they do to find information, so that then we can surface the apps that are relevant to that journey in the right places. So there will always probably be a library, which will be a searchable repository. Yeah. But I think the most valuable thing we can do is understand how people interact with our website and place it at the right time. So for example, we have a conditions page that links, people tend to Google diabetes or something like that, and it will link through to a conditions page. And what we will tend to do is then signpost from that page so it's in the right context.
All right. Well, time flies when you talk about interesting things like this. But as a conclusion, what advice would you give us in Sweden? We haven't really started with the work yet, but what advice would you give to us?
I think the best piece of advice is always start with a beta, because there will be lots of unknowns, and there'll be, this is quite a new landscape. So, and starting with a beta gives you the opportunity to test and involve other user groups. It brings all those interested stakeholders out and to the fore so that you can engage with them on making it the best live service it could be.
Well, thank you so much, Hazel.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you for coming to Gothenburg.
Thank you.